too young.
You're right. Not like this guy.
Well, no, she was 9, right? You were 9. So, all right. So, I hope to do you justice. I am who he says I am, and for my full-time work, I'm a physician assistant at Columbia University Medical Center, where I've been just short of 30 years treating folks with HIV. Then I did HIV vaccine research. And then COVID happened, and I was one of the lucky ones who got to stay in the middle of that mess. And I was going to retire afterwards, like a number of people who had PTSD were going to. But I took a few months off, and now I work with patients who have long COVID and COVID vaccine injury. And yes, the second part does exist. I would not have admitted that some years ago, but it's a real thing. So that's what I do for money, and that's how I'll be able to retire and so on. In the meantime, I had, starting in the early 70s, a hippie fetish, sort of nipping at the heels of a counterculture that was dying, but that I wanted to continue on in my own life. And so I became an amateur archivist of that. I wouldn't have known either of those words at the time, and started collecting stuff and reading anything I could get my hands on, and over the course of decades met lots and lots of people. And so I started interviewing way before I knew what the term, or ever heard the term oral history, right? I'm a Johnny-come-lately to academic stuff. But I interviewed many, many people who had been part of the San Francisco scene. Chet Helms, who opened the Avalon Ballroom and brought Janis Joplin up from Austin, Texas. Stephen Gaskin, who started the commune, The Farm in Tennessee, and on and on and on. And I was in love with doing this and figuring out who these people were, and somehow using oral history in a way, in retrospect, to nostalgically go after something I had not been part of, right? And I think that's embedded in my definition of oral history, right? Using it as a sort of a portal into something that you feel drawn to, but that you weren't actually part of, but it ends up making you feel like you were. Or, it's nostalgia is, this kind of, this sense of bittersweetness, right? Bittersweet memories. And it evoked that from me emotionally. There was something bitter and sweet about it. So anyway, I'll leave that alone. So that's who I am. I started interviewing folks, and then 2014, I learned about the oral history degree at Columbia. And I went to a workshop and enjoyed what I heard, and they told me I didn't have to do well on the GREs, so I didn't study for them. And I got in. And I was there for 3 years. It's just a 1-year program, but I work full time, so I just had to kind of even it out so that I wasn't driven crazy. So what I'm gonna try and do today is to bring home those concepts that made sense to me in what I do, without trying to flood you with 2 years of academia, right? Because it's impossible and it's not interesting. So, but since graduating Columbia, I have been involved in the 50th anniversary of Stonewall oral histories through the Tenement Museum and Google, and it was the 50th anniversary of Woodstock as well. I did that one, and I've been doing Woodstock since then, Woodstock attendees. And then I expanded out to bring in oral histories of countercultural figures who may not have been at Woodstock. And then I did the Borscht Belt oral histories. We have about 100 of them, and that was through the Woodstock Museum's the museum at Bethel Woods collaboration with the Borscht Belt, which was interesting to me. I didn't realize how into it I would get. After several hundred interviews with folks who had been at Woodstock and knowing those stories really, really well, getting the stories of people who had been part of bungalow colonies, I'm not going to say this right, Kuchelein?
Yeah, good.
Pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
Gentile. The folks who came up from the city, the folks who lived here and had like chicken farms and started these bungalow colonies, all of that stuff was really, really, really interesting to me. And I think one of the points I want to make right now, before I forget, is when you're thinking about the project you're working on, you want to think like multi-dimensionally about those things that you want to get to, right? The idea of an oral history generally is this thing where you're sitting there and letting folks ramble on for hours without intervening, right? I'm never going to be that person, all right? But so for instance, with the Borscht Belt, I would, consider, where the people were coming from, what their ages were they part of the bungalow colonies, were they part of the hotels, what was happening with their families economically when they were able to move out of the bungalow colonies into the hotels and so on, and really kind of capturing this multi-dimensional and full lens of each person and what they were going through, okay? So I'm gonna actually ask people to break off into groups, but before I do so, I just wanna go through a formal definition of oral history. Or does anybody feel like saying what they think an oral history is? You can even participate if you'd like. One of the things I like to do is use hard journalism as a reference point, right? Being the interviewer, doing hard journalism, looking at, disasters or crimes or abuse.
So that might be then the notion of who, what, when, where, and why, the journalistic, how do you tell a story kind of thing.
And it's kind, the interviewer is looked at as a bit of a blank slate, right? They're not bringing anything into that interview, right? This is with hard journalism. And they're trying to get an arrow to go straight into the target, right into the heart of the matter, right? Oral histories aren't like that, right? That's not what's happening here, right? Two of the most important things that I learned at Columbia can be summed up in one sentence, and that is that there is no pure moment. To me, when I heard that, I was like, oh man, okay, I understand. And to not synthesize information. And I'm going to get to what I mean by that in a moment, okay? So let me just take a look at my notes here and see if I'm following correctly. The oral histories are really working with people in a conversation to talk about their memories of things. It's going to evoke stuff from them that's emotional. It's going to include the fragility of memory. Geez, I'm not sure about this, So a number of things that a hard journalist would think, well, that's a problem. I don't want to include that. This is the world of oral histories, right? There is no pure moment means that, say you're working on a subject, you're working on Woodstock. What was it like to be at the hog farm commune, right? And who were the people who were cooking? And what ends up happening is you get an array of opinions, right? There is no pure moment. It's a lens that keeps increasing and increasing. You're never going to get to the sense of the truth of what the hog farm was like, right? everything from, my God, they helped us at this very important time and fed us, to I'll never have granola again. There's this kind of thing. So, oral history is characterized by its focus on personal experience, subjectivity, and memory through recorded conversational interviews. You're having a dialogue with folks, right? You're not a blank slate. Often, it says aims to capture the unwritten past and often highlights underrepresented voices. At Columbia, underrepresented voices, especially in the time of woke, really meant, going to help get the voices of those people who had been oppressed. I'd like to expand that out to include people you'll be interviewing who aren't the higher ups in anything, right? They're the neighbor, the person who was driving the school bus, somebody in charge of sanitation. It doesn't matter. All of these voices count because all of them are these individual lenses into the ambiance of a particular time, right? And it just increases your sense of what something was like, right? I have to say that when I first started doing oral histories, and because I'm what's the word? Persnickety about dates and times and so on, it was hard for me to accept the idea that we weren't going to close in on the truth, right? That is part of my personality, that is there. But one of the things that one has to get used to, is that there are many different lenses that people are looking at events from, and that there is the fragility of memory, right? Big time. And it's the concept of misremembering. In oral history, misremembering is okay. It is a flaw that is understood to be okay, right? The idea is, why do people misremember? What were they misremembering here? What was the environment that made them think a different way? I don't know if I'm saying this well enough. Let me give you an example. One of the projects I did for Columbia was the Human Bee Inn. January 14th, 1967, the gathering of the tribes in San Francisco in Golden Gate Park, the Grateful Dead, Allen Ginsberg, the Haight-Ashbury scene makes its way into the park. And I interviewed one woman who got back in touch with me a few days later, and the subject line said, "Human being fraud." Human being fraud. And she called me and she said, "I am so sorry. I spoke to my boyfriend at that time. We got back in touch, and he said we were not at that gathering." Right? We were not there. And I just thought, because I am very particular, I almost said anal, but the oral thing becomes weird in this. Forgive that moment. I thought, I just have to get rid of that interview. This is useless to me. And I was in class. I don't know if anybody's heard of Alessandro Portelli. He is the king of oral histories, known worldwide. And I told him of this. It wasn't a dilemma. I was going to get rid of the interview or just not do anything. And he said to me, "Oh, a patchwork of memories of the time that made her think that she had been there," right? So maybe she had been at other happenings in the Panhandle. Maybe she had been at the Avalon Ballroom and everybody's dancing joyously together. Any of those particular things that she may have been part of and happening in the park could have made her thought that she was there, all right? So it still was hard for me to put together that that was okay. Does that hit anybody else as problematic?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when I was researching my book, I'm going through some stuff, with what's called vertical files in the library, just filing cabinets filled with a lot of information, newspaper articles, maybe stuff that was published by different churches, fire companies, etc.
Yeah.
So I'm reading stuff about the Lutheran Church, and I think it was maybe their 75th anniversary, and it's wrong. I'm going, no, whoever wrote this was wrong.
Just remember.
Yeah, so you have to accept that that's what they thought was right. History is, in the moment, a lot of times. A lot of people tell you, oh, sure, I knew about this. And they're giving you information and you have to dissect it, so your own research. But I remember looking at that saying, what else is wrong in this article?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you dissect it and you say, okay, well, this I can, I've got other information and research that sustains this, just not that one or two things that they had incorrect, so you just gotta use your judgment.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were able to get the information to corroborate when it actually,
Part of it, I wasn't, in the mistakes, I was like, okay, I know that that's not right, because it's written and there's deeds and et cetera, and numbers didn't match up, there was a street number, and I was like, it couldn't be there, because something else was there at that point, So you kinda have to sometimes just dissect it.
Yeah.
And say, okay, this was somebody's memory, and somebody wrote it down, and everybody who got that little pamphlet thought, this is great, this is what it was.
Yeah.
But it always isn't that way.
Yeah. In oral history, the thing that you do with that, what seems to become the outlier material is to pull it in and consider the ambiance that it's expressing, right? To the dates and times may be wrong, but there's a feeling there that needs to become part of the actual lens. Let me just see if my definition of, because I'm not looking at my agenda almost at all.
You're giving us an oral history.
Am I? I hope I'm getting that. So, forgive, but I am going to just read this part. Misremembering is a common and expected part of oral history, as memory is subjective, shaped by emotion, context, and personal bias, and can be accurate. Rather than being a flaw to be eliminated, Stephen, misremembering is a key part of the oral history process, offering insight into the meaning, emotion, and social context behind a person's memory, even when the facts are distorted. Right? It's difficult.
Yes.
It's difficult. The dates and times, that is something that the oral historian does go back and, does the research and corroborates.
Yeah.
But the oral history, when you figure out that information, what the date and time and where the event was, is correct, the other stuff isn't expunged from the archives. That's in there, all right? Is that part difficult to anybody?
It gives you, I think it gives you the human context and
Yes.
the human content of what was going on. I mean, we can figure out when that building was built or something, but what was it like to be around at that time? What did it feel like? It's very different from today. What do you remember of what it felt like?
Yeah.
And also, you can't dismiss that person's recollection.
Right.
Of another example, so we had a tragedy in our family. So I have two older sisters and myself, and I have two younger siblings. So the youngest sibling was only 4 years old. So we talked about this throughout the last 60 years. And we realized that her memory is our stories.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? She was there, but she was 4.
Mm-hmm.
But we listened to exactly what she's saying. So my eldest sister was like, well, she doesn't remember that. I said, yeah, she does. Because she doesn't remember maybe from that day, but she remembers it from 2 years past, 3 years past when you're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just as important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's contextual, it's emotional,
Right.
it's part of the,
Yes.
there's this osmosis of memory happening. You know, it's real. That's a
Yeah,
very good
it's real,
example.
Yeah, and she's not saying anything that's not part of that, you know, environment and what happened then. It's just that, it's, you know, we listen to her and say, yeah, we told that story.
Yeah.
So if you're
And she was
listening
kinda
to
young,
someone's
yeah.
oral history,
Yeah.
and they're stating facts that are clearly wrong, like completely wrong, do you correct that or kind of guide them in the right direction, or do you just let it roll?
So this is one of those, that's a very good question. I think there's a few different texts that can be used there. In a way that makes them, where they understand that you're acknowledging the bigness of their story, there is the potential to say, oh, that's interesting, because I thought that perhaps, I had read elsewhere, or, you know, that it happened on this day in front of this place. If you know, cordially try to not over pivot, but offer an alternative way of thinking and see, you know, if that does anything. Often it does,
Sometimes it
honestly,
does, yeah.
right? I mean, there's like, oh, you might be right. I thought, you know, that it happened on this day, or that was that truck driver, or, you know, that's okay. It's a matter of what your approach is like, because you're in a discussion, right? You're framing, the person comes in, and you're making a very comfortable setting. Sometimes it's their homes, right? You try not to have recording equipment all over the place. With some of the Borscht Belt stuff that we do, or the Woodstock stuff, we have gigantic cameras and everything, and Klieg lights. But you're involved in a conversation, and this is going to pivot into the next thing I had on the agenda that I skipped over too. So it is okay to offer that there's other information, and that you want to just, you know, clarify, right? I'm much pushier than that. All right, I do not do what I do, right? Which means you can. So I do straddle at times because of my specificity with times and places and what color LSD was being used at the time. I might be, no, I'm not going to bulldoze, but, you know, I'm going to try and get that in there, right? I don't believe in not intervening, personally. I'm unorthodox in a way, right? But it really depends on how you're having the conversation with that person and how you're leading into it. You know, not as a know-it-all, right, which I can actually end up doing, but to, you know, make it kind of an easy transition into them thinking about it, right? It's okay. It's okay. And speaking of, and you bring me to the next point, but you're getting to, you know, to what extent do you correct somebody, right? Especially if you know the exact, you know, information, right? You have my permission to get that in there. But the other concept to understand about oral history is intersubjectivity, all right? And this goes to the idea that you're not a blank slate. You're going there with who you are and what your interests are, and the way you ask questions is helping to produce the product, right? It's not them, right? We have 3 different oral historians at the Bethel Woods Museum. Or they're museum folk who are doing oral histories now. They weren't trained, but you don't have to be majorly true. You don't need to have a degree from Columbia University, I swear. It's not important, right? You're gonna get this just by doing these, all right? So making that whole thing, I forget my original point.
Not a blank slate.
Not a blank slate, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm paying for dinner too.
Okay, good.
All right. So, intersubjectivity. It really, let me just go to the, do I have? Again, sorry for reading, but just, so it's the collaborative and mutual process between the interviewer and the narrator where the individual subjectivities, identities, experiences, and emotions interact and shape the shared narrative. It recognizes that the interview is not a neutral exchange, but a co-created event where both participants influence the outcome. And the final story is a product of their combined relationship.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And even that, from the part of me that thinks that there's such a thing as pure history, it's okay to wonder about these things when you're doing oral histories. What am I bringing to this? Am I bringing too much to this? You're never bringing too much to it unless you're being really interventionist and sort of trying to demand a outcome. And I'm going to talk about this as well. I think a lot of this conversation is things that I have done over the years that I came to recognize is not the thing to do when you're doing oral history, right? So if one of the most important things I learned at Columbia was there is no pure moment, right? This isn't about one thing. It's going to look like many different things. The building that was, who were the bricklayers, the stories of the people who, were actually in different positions, the sanitation, it doesn't matter. All of this stuff just makes it bigger and bigger and bigger. It never makes it, one answer, one truth. So there is no pure moment. And the other thing that was said to me, and I'm going to tell you why, is don't synthesize, all right? So that happened because my oral history project, I wanted to make the case, already I'm in deep water. I wanted to make the case that the hippie movement influenced the gay liberation movement in the late 60s, early 70s, right? I won't go through all of it. In the macrocosm, the force of the anti-war movements and the Black Panther movement and all of those other things did communicate to a generation of young gay people to go forward that way as well. But when I did oral histories with people who were living in the Haight-Ashbury and elsewhere, I would get people like, well, it was really, the guys with the chicks, and there wasn't a lot of, I wouldn't walk down Haight Street holding hands with somebody and so on. And when I get that story, there was a part of me that was like, that's not going with the thing that I want to have happen here. Right. And this is going to happen in the oral histories that you're doing, right? And it's important, it's almost kind of this reflection on what it is that you're looking for and to beware, B-E-W-A-R-E, that is problematic. And it ends up holding up a mirror to yourself, your own reflection, right? And it's a good thing to happen. So I said to Mary Marshall Clark, who was the director of the oral history program at Columbia, I'm having a problem with some of these oral histories because I can't synthesize. And as if she had spent a year teaching somebody who wasn't listening to a word she said, she leaned back and said,
Get out.
What?
Get out.
Don't synthesize. Don't synthesize. The two big things, no pure moment and don't synthesize. That is those are the fumes I run on. There may be, and you got to think about this about who you are and what it is that you're looking to bring to your oral history project, right? What it is that you want to get out of it. And to think about the information that you're interested in, which is fine. When you're thinking of the history of, what's the name of the area? Up on the hill there? I love that place. When you're thinking about that, there's many different tentacles coming down of subject matter that you're going to want to get to, right? All of that is good. All of that is okay. You don't want to just have rambling oral histories where you're not able to interject, well, what about the time that the horse buggy fell over or what have you? I'm being very city-centric here. I hope that was okay. But, and to see what you are bringing into it, allow that to go out there as part of the conversation that you're having with people, as part of the oral history, because that's what you're interested in. That's the intersubjectivity. But to make sure that you're not trying to buckle down that bit of information you have in that interest so that it's absolutely supported by the person who you're speaking to, right? You gotta be aware. So that's yet another thing I did wrong. Any questions up to
So
this
one of
point?
the things I found when you're talking to somebody one-on-one, you just gotta keep peeling away. I did a series of 3 interviews, 3 brothers, World War II soldiers, and they couldn't remember anything until we got talking.
Yeah.
We got peeling away. Oh, you were there. So what happened when you were there? What'd you do afterwards? And all of a sudden I realized one was my father, okay? That he was through the Panama Canal 9 times. He couldn't tell me that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, it was an hour into it. Well, then I went to the European, well, how'd you get there? I went to the Panama Canal. Then I went back to the Pacific. Well, how'd you get there? So when we were done, we found out information that he didn't even think he had.
Yeah.
So we just kept peeling away.
And so that's a perfect, I don't even have to do the Woodstock model now. That's perfect. No, thank you. So, you're gonna get folks who sit down and say, gotta be honest with you, I don't know what I'm gonna tell you. I really don't have much, and so with Woodstock, it might start with, I do like to get a bit of background information so that I can have a sense of how somebody's life unfolds to where they're walking out on that field, if we're talking about Woodstock, for instance, all right? I want that information. I don't know how long the oral history interviews, what you're thinking about in terms of the amount of time, if you're considering maybe blocks of an hour and then maybe follow-up questions if you need to. But you're going to figure all of that out, right? All of that's.
Is there a time that's too long?
So I get kind of brain foggy and glaze over, even if it's an interesting topic. About an hour, 15 minutes in. And I don't want the person who I'm speaking to feel like they're being overtaxed either. So I'll be checking in with them as well. Neil Hitch at the museum did, I guess, 3 hours with a member of the Grateful Dead. That's a long time, right? The Barack Obama Oral History Project through Columbia had a number of oral historians getting histories, and they were hours and hours and hours long, right? Oral histories can be as long as you want them. the oral histories that I did for the Borscht Belt and for Woodstock and for the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, at most would go about an hour and a half, at most, right? And sometimes it was less. Sometimes it was less. It's a lot to push through, right? But, and you've clearly done oral histories before, because that's exactly the way you're having the conversation with folks, right? You are slowly peeling away at this onion.
I call it an onion.
Right?
That's exactly what I call it, yes.
And actually to that point, I would like to, I hope you all want to do this, to try and just break off in twos and maybe spend about 10 minutes each having a oral history conversation with each other, and one being the oral historian and the other being the narrator. And then we talk about what that feels like, right? The whole thing, open-ended questions, having a discussion, and seeing what that feels like to you. I think we should probably think of a theme. I don't know if it was the first day of kindergarten, or we are talking about the fragility of memory. First day of college, first day of a new job. We're getting closer. Where you did 9/11.
History of communities.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm particularly interested in wanting to do this because of my involvement with Cragsmore history.
I would love to say one more history.
Yeah. And we're three, very involved in that. We write for it. She's the president. She's lived a heck of a lot of it. It's important to us.
Would you like that to be the theme of when you?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna. That's my long term.
Community,
Yeah.
no matter which rule we choose. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can just talk with each other.
Yeah.
But I'd like you to do that. And the passion that you're talking about right there, the communities, the growth of communities, the way they're held together and so on, that's a great thing to talk about. You're gonna have to zero in on something about that, or just the other person's interest.
Well, I'm most interested in preserving stuff that's gonna disappear, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in Cragsmore for 36 years, but there's a lot of people that have been in Cragsmore for 80 years, and they know stuff that I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. And you want to get at those
I
folks
wanna
before
get at it before they're gone,
That's right. That's what we
because
do.
they go.
I'd say the Borscht Belt oral histories and the Woodstock oral histories, the push in the last few years has been based on we're going to lose these folks, right?
They have already.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. Okay. To that end, if you wouldn't mind taking, 10 minutes and exchanging your interests in an oral history manner, and then we'll talk about how you felt and the way you felt about the, moving the conversation along. Can we do that?
I don't know how you want. We all know each other, so
How about, if I've,
Jeff doesn't know most of these. Jeff doesn't know Mary or Donna.
yeah, of course, nowhere near as well as you do. I know something about Cragsmore from having been born and raised here and visiting friends up in Cragsmore all the time. So, but I don't have the lived experience of being a resident of Cragsmore. So maybe, what do you think of that?
Well, you got 3 people that knew Cragsmore. You got 3 people that.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking,
for them,
Bucky. Yeah.
Okay. And then get different stories from each of the 3 of them. How's that?
I'm fresh meat, I don't know.
So you're suggesting 3 and 3?
Well.
Or,
Oh, 2 and 2 on 3
and 2.
twos,
We got
3
3
pairs.
people who are familiar with Cragsmore. Let's
okay.
consider that our topic.
So we ask you about Ellenville, you ask us about Cragsmore.
No, he said one person is interviewer, one person is the
each of us
interviewee.
interview one of you.
Yeah.
And then we come up with different.
So talk about how you
oral
felt about it.
histories,
And
all
talk,
the
Yeah,
same
this
thing.
is
we're not going to get down to the bottom
we're
of
not
that.
gonna
Right.
get the oral history today.
Nickel ain't worth a dime anymore.
Yeah, right.
Nobody goes there
Nobody
anymore.
goes there
It's
anymore,
too
too
crowded.
popular, yeah.
Also,
Jim Bowie.
Well, thank you.
I've just remembered,
You're done, you're done. You've always wanted to move to
There's an
Craigslist.
interesting
You know, it's
word.
funny you say that.
I'm thinking
Before I
George
bought the
Bush.
place that I'm in now.
Don't make us get the fire hose.
Strategic, and words like that, misremembered, feels like that kind of word.
Just the moon didn't align with the stars.
I forget the words he got wrong.
In some respects.
Now he almost seems like a dream.
Yes, thank you. No, I'm getting annoying phone calls.
Well, that's because you're a popular man.
Very, very involved in this.
Did you know him before?
Yes.
He's a great guy.
I'm gonna disqualify that couple.
So are you a believer in an interview with the interviewer sitting down with a series of questions in front of them?
Oh, we got more space to go to.
Okay.
Can you do this in groups?
We have, like a couple of people who've gone to Woodstock together. We got a couple of people who were part of the Students for Democratic Society who are trying to
Oh, yeah.
foment revolution at,
SDS.
and they did it together. Yeah, but you know, the thing that you want to have, and you want to think about the transcriber in those circumstances, is to let folks know first. Let one of you finish what you're saying completely before everybody's talking over each other.
But I think that what you really want to try to do is record these things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have two people, that you have to get into camera work at that point, or unless you can stand back far enough. I
Well,
guess.
so then that gets into the whole IT part of this.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
But, okay.
Is it better to do video than just audio? Because some people are very nervous on video.
Right.
Yeah?
Well, Danny did some interviews for us when we first put up our website,
Okay.
talking, and people were nervous about being
Really?
videotaped.
One of the things that I'll send around later today, somebody's talking about, I have a couple of links doing, Oral History 101, and trying to get the recording stuff out of the way, get the wires out of the way and so on. Preferably not having, cameras and lights. We do,
Yeah.
we do. But it can make a difference in how somebody feels.
Well, I would think that having several people, some people might get the other people going, oh yeah, I remember that, kind of stuff.
Which is both interesting and irritating as hell. Right, especially when you're trying to do that. So, but let me ask folks how they felt in the positions, whether narrator or interviewer, and how it went. And there's no wrong in this, all right? Only in my head. Go ahead.
So I have a little bit of general knowledge of what we were talking about.
Yeah.
So I started with her knowledge at the very beginning of this community, and then we built off of that. So she was pretty much reinforcing what I knew. Then we got to a point specifically about something, and she corrected me. So my own perception of history was changed, okay, because I thought the Matzes lived somewhere else. All right, so I didn't dwell on that. I just took that in, okay, and moved right past it. But it educated me, personally as an historian, a little interpretation of something, okay. And then we went to one specific building. So we did this broad thing, and we went on one building and talked about the one building, which I found very, very interesting. And we could have talked about that building and that relationship for another half hour.
Who was?
I was the
Questioner.
the questioner.
Okay, all right. And so in asking the questions, you noted that, what was the information that was wrong, real quick?
Oh, where somebody lived.
Where somebody lived. Did that, it sounds like it wasn't a big deal. Did it pivot it in any way, or was
No.
it just a
No.
moment of you bringing
More
that back
than me
home?
saying, oh, you're wrong. Okay, move on. And we just kept on the conversation without really talking about that. Yeah, yeah.
And when you heard him say wrong information, how did you express that?
No, I told him his information was wrong.
Yeah, that's what I mean,
What
I'm
did you
sorry.
feel about that?
Correcting him.
You know, I felt fine. I mean, I know that he's not from our community,
Right.
and, you know, I just corrected him. It was,
That was it. We didn't
Yeah.
spend any time on it.
Right, okay. It went seamlessly.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Did you feel comfortable in the way you're having the conversation, in open-ended questions?
Yes.
Okay,
I did. I don't know. I think she did as well,
Yeah.
but I did, yes.
okay, all right.
And then as we're having the conversation, I brought it from a wide part of the community, and I decided while we're talking to bring it to one structure and talk about one particular thing. Because I knew we had a short period of time here and I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. And then you also know that we circle around in oral histories all the time, right? So you got some information and it makes you think, boy, I want to get back to that point,
Yes.
right? And so let's go back to that. You know, the lens keeps increasing and increasing and increasing.
And one of the
his
things
le-
about,
I'm sorry,
go ahead, Mary.
his lens was focused on what he knows,
Yeah.
which was the
Right.
stone church,
Right.
his history with the stone church, so.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of interesting too, because I learned from that.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, well, there's a whole history with St. John's and the Stone
Yeah.
Church, yeah.
So let me just say real quick, I mean, that's just the sort of the fundamental definition of intersubjectivity, of what you both brought to that together and coming up with the final product of the oral history, right? The questioner and the narrator are producing that, right? It's not, you weren't going in for the zinger on anything in particular,
No.
right? It kept getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
Okay.
One of the things that's different, I think, about us here is that we're all part of this community, so we're gonna be asking people about stuff we already know about.
Yeah.
But like Bucky may not have stuff that Mary doesn't know, and Mary has stuff that Bucky doesn't know. And that's real interesting, I think. It's different from maybe the way you come into a community and start asking questions as a total outsider. I mean, maybe you've done some study of it, but you haven't lived with it for 36 years or something like we have. So that's a difference, I think.
Which leads me to the question, if because of our familiarity, if we're not familiar with the subject, or if you're not familiar with the subject as an interviewer, how do you prepare yourself?
Yeah.
So it's on the agenda.
Sorry.
It was probably like number 1 and I started at number 5 or something like that, but
That's the open-ended questions there.
so let's go through how people conducted their interviews and how it went, and then we'll go to, what do you do to do an oral history, right?
Okay.
Anybody?
So I interviewed Donna when she was the narrator, and what I tried to elicit from her was her perspective of where she lives, how she got there, and how she sees it. Having some understanding of the geographical makeup and the character of the community that she lives in, it was equally as fascinating for me because I learned from her. And we also, I think if we had another 15 or 20 minutes, that lens would have gotten bigger and bigger because we started talking about some of the legacy people that live there and some of the new people that moved there. And again, her perspective really, she's a new kid. She's only been there 50 years, but no, it was fascinating for me.
And I love that. I love your example because as an historian, you're able to be moved, right? Because you're hearing the emotion of something and you're hearing, these smaller ingredients that go into the macro that you understand pretty well, but it's that percolating up from below, that organic understanding that's like, wow, this feels more full to me. That's the sense. I'm putting words in your mouth, which I'm not supposed to do because I'm an oral historian.
You've captured it. And again, the perspective that Donna provided me was unique because of how she got there and how her life evolved in the community. So again, I was given several different vantage points because of that.
Great, 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 great.
So the other thing that I got out of it when we were talking broadly was probably about 5 other subjects I would have gone on to as we had the time.
Yeah.
I would have gone back to the new people coming in and what changes in the community, et cetera. That she brought up that we just kept on, talking about, we didn't explore it. So I had 4 or 5 subjects I would have brought up as we continue talking.
Yeah.
That I learned that I wouldn't have brought up before our conversation.
Yeah, yeah, and then there'll be the opportunity to do that the next time around,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah, oh, I love this, okay, great. Anybody else want to share what they felt or
The
thought?
two Jeffs.
Well,
Yeah, the other Jeff, the 2 Jeffs.
You know, what I was interested in hearing, and I guess, I brought that perspective to the conversation, is what Jeff felt was important to, we're both on the Preservation Commission, so I use the word to preserve about the Cragsmore, the lived experience that he's had for 36 years, and in Cragsmore, he kind of introduced, I had that factoid, whatever, that, he's been living the Cragsmore experience for 36 years. And there are people, that he well knows from all that time who have even more lived experience. Before that goes away, he'd like to, history, it seemed from our conversation, is about people, right? It's made up of all these, these different people make a community's history. And so it's like losing, part of that, gestalt when people go away. So that we were kind of generally, the broad piece of that was the broad piece of the conversation. And then we, had a couple of examples of folks who, Jeff recalled as very interesting folks in the community to him, and how that illustrated for him why, some of the motivating piece of why he'd like to capture that.
Yeah, yeah. Are you, how are you, well, we can get into it a little later, but I'm wondering how you're approaching that at this point. Is there social media involved, or?
I mean, I'm gonna work, I wanna work with Mary.
Yeah.
Mary and I work together a lot, and there are a couple people that I think I wanna get Bruce Garrett
Yes.
and
yes,
Dick Peters and spend a few hours with them, cause they're both in their upper 80s, and they're not, neither one of them's doing all that. Well, Bruce is probably doing better than Dick.
I think his memory's better than that.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, the time, there's a pressure of time on all of this, as we were talking about earlier.
Is there a structure set up to start going after these folks?
No, not
No,
really.
We've talked about it, that's.
We
been-
did, the library did a few years ago, right? It did,
And we've done a few.
Little, he was, before he died, he was 100 years old, but you have a couple of them in your archives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should try to put together an archive of these things, you know?
We've done Sally Matz,
You did Sally, okay.
Mary Thurston, and, John, Stanger. Which you could talk to John for hours.
Yes.
John Stanger?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I am pivoting a little bit because as you're talking, I have used social media. When I say social media, I mean Facebook, Instagram, and all of those other things. I just don't have that chromosome. I just don't. Right? I don't know if I ever will. But for the Borscht Belt oral histories, there were all of these sites on Facebook. Borscht Belt stories, people who come from Liberty, on and on, Grossinger's, on, and I would post in each one of them. But I'm wondering what the local way of doing it, are there Facebook sites? And then again, the reason I say Facebook is older people are not generally going to be looking at Instagram or TikTok and so on. Facebook, for some of them, might even be a stretch. So it's a matter of thinking about how you're gonna get to these folks. But it sounds like you know a lot
Well,
of
we
them.
do. I mean, there's only 500 people or something, and we know,
It's a
Most of
very
them.
small community.
yeah, and just, we gotta start talking to them.
See, unlike the Borscht Belt Museum.
Yeah, this is
which
kind of more
Which
anonymous.
is like, there's an anonymity, and there's a wider net to cast
Yeah.
as well. Standing in the museum, for example, and doing an oral history interview there, it just may be by chance. My favorite story is last summer, two gentlemen walked in, they both were in their 90s, they didn't know each other. One was a waiter at the hotel and the other one booked talent for the hotels. They started talking and we said, time out. And we drew them in,
Yeah.
both together and separately, but we really don't have the advantage of the basis that the folks in the community have, who can identify those names. So we're flying by the seat of our pants,
Yeah.
we really are. And Facebook and Instagram,
Yeah.
there's a lot of Borscht
So-
Belt interest out
Right,
there.
Facebook is a good place to start
Yeah.
probably with it, because the Borscht Belt.
But we need to,
Facebook
we
has a
need to
lot
be
of
able to do
followers,
it
yeah.
remotely, which we're not doing right now. We set up a studio in the museum where you can walk in and have, if somebody's there at the time and record. But the folks who are doing the interviews most of them are not trained, which is a disadvantage too, and sometimes of eliciting information out of someone. But if we could do it remotely, I think we would be able to expand our collection. And I know it's off-putting for some people, but I love the ability to have a camera in the room too, because it just, not in their face, but to capture that emotion at the time as well.
Yeah. And it's an individual thing, and of course, the folks that you speak to, you're gonna have to ask them how they feel about doing that.
Yeah.
And then maybe if they say, no, that wouldn't be something I'm interested in, still have the camera off to the side and sneak it over and say, does this really inhibit you that much, Interesting that it sounds like you're gonna start writing lists of these people and getting in touch with them and so on.
Yeah.
And we're gonna talk about then, so oral history, right? You have your subject. This is gonna take 15 seconds. You find your narrators, right? You research as much as you can about the topic that you're interested in. It sounds like you know the topic, right? But as you noticed, the topic expands that you think you know, right? So keep that in mind, right? You reach out to those folks to let them know that you'd like to do an oral history. It's a pre-oral history discussion about who you are and what the project is. I can send you these links, there's
Great.
it's very simple. And to the best of your ability, maybe in that pre-oral history interview, to get a sense of where they were at the time, and to see if there's any background information that you can look into, any research that you're able to do. Or maybe they might even say, you could ask them, you could say, is any of your information anywhere, the school that you taught at, or so on, and maybe look online and look at the school and look at its history, whatever you can compile before you get in there, right? Because things are going to interest you, and you want to be able to speak to them as people who have a sense of where they're coming from without explaining their history for them, but to to be aware. I'll tell you one. So this is another Stephen Palmer did wrong thing. Does anybody remember the rock band Tracy Nelson and the Mother Earth?
Nope.
So I was interviewing Tracy Nelson. I had my information, a lot of information about her already, but there was quite a bit I didn't have. And she said, "So Stephen, you know, the way you do an oral history, it was so embarrassing. You're supposed to know these things already." I think she went too far, and I resented her ever since. But, you know, take a look at the topic and where you think that person may have fit in, and write some stuff down to yourself. You're gonna. So let me hand these out too. This is what we did. This is a questionnaire that we used for the Borscht Belt. And we have them for the Woodstock oral histories as well. And you're being very multi-purpose there. Yeah. So you're getting in touch with these folks, and then you're making a date and time, you know, and who said doing remotely might be better? So you may find out, and especially if you're talking about older folks, of being able to go to their homes.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, bringing, you know, the recording equipment, maybe a second person who knows how to use the recording equipment. I say that specifically for myself because there's always something I'm going to screw up. Always. And the way I start out, so you get them, you go to their home, and really you say, you know, this is a conversation. It's a conversation. And I say, you know, before we start, I'm going to start with the formalities. Before we get started, do we have your permission to record this conversation and transcribe it and include it in our permanent collection at your historic societies? Can I please have you say and spell your full name? Do that, all right? Can you tell me where you reside? You know, it's going to be easy, Cragsmore, right? So this is Stephen Palmer interviewing Joanne Newman on such date for this museum, for the collection. And then we have this, my name is, and I was part of the Borscht Belt history, and you know, you can do that. I tell people this, here, we have a schmaltzy moment about to happen. My name is so-and-so, and I was at Woodstock. But that is, the formality is a good thing to have on you, right? Mm-hmm. And because this is going to then translate into or happen instead of the legal release, all right? Because you're getting the permission right there, all right? We go for both places. And so we have a number of questions that we wrote down. We kind of thought about what would be important about the Borscht Belt. What was a typical day like for you? What role did, you know, religion play? You know, certainly, you know, among Jewish families who were the primary denizens of the Borscht Belt. But I don't think I ever look at this when I'm doing it. Every now and then I jog my memory with something, you know, if all of a sudden everything goes out of my mind, I'm like, it's helpful to have that around. I write notes up and down and all over the place, right? If somebody says something, you know, that really captures me. Somebody said last week, he was at Woodstock, and he said, it was our best moment. And just to me, that hit me because I knew that he meant that, and then wasn't a moment like that again. And so you're talking about, you know, so ask about these types of, you know, what do you mean by that? And how did you feel afterwards and so on. But it's good to go in there with a number of questions, all right? That you think cover a lot of your interests and the history of what you're talking about. If you were to think about that for a moment with Cragsmore, what kind of questions might you have, just off the top of your head?
Well, I'm interested in families. I mean, there's one guy that I'm particularly interested in his family was very important in Cragsmore 125 years ago, because they ran the store and the post office and the gas station and everything. And he, as a little kid, remembers all that stuff, and he's now in his 80s. So I want to start piercing into that. He's lived in Cragsmore. He loves Cragsmore. He's kind of a eccentric fella, but he loves to talk about it, and I'd like to get him going. I mean, he could probably talk all afternoon about it, frankly. And that's going to go.
And this summer, one of our journal articles is going to be things that are gone from Cragsmore.
Oh, wow.
Like Garrett's store, the hotel, you know,
Yeah.
multitude
Restaurant,
of
the
boarding
Wawarsing
houses,
theater,
the theater, the pool,
Yeah.
and he would be a wealth of information for that.
Well, let's get him, Mary.
I know. We want to do a map, insert of a map with the missing
Yeah.
spots, so.
And then would you consider collaborating with each other after and talk about
Oh,
the
yeah, I
histories
would.
you've done?
Is there,
and
I mean, I
then
was gonna ask you, does this have to be one-on-one, or if I was gonna do it, I'd like to have Mary there, or whoever else that wanted to be there, and I don't know if probably Bruce wouldn't wanna bring anybody else, but his son lives in Cragsmore, and he might wanna bring him in, I don't know.
Maureen might be good.
Maureen,
depending on
yeah.
how she's, you know.
Yeah, there's a problem there.
Yeah, no, that is fine. We've done that before, you know. Neil Hitch is very interested in a number of aspects of Woodstock. He's really almost creating what the geography was, all the areas around, not just the field, right? And so I had a couple just a few weeks ago who I knew were camping there. And
Back in the day, in '69.
69.
Yeah.
Not now.
Yeah.
And so he came in with me, and after I did a whole section of oral history, interviewing, you know, I just looked at him, I said, you know, this sounds like a good, he mentioned something about the campground and the tent and what they brought, and then which I could do myself, but I brought Neil in because he has even a greater sense of how big that can go, right? And I'm very, you know, we're respectful of each other's interest, right? And and that's your intersubjectivity, right? That's the thing you're bringing to it, right? You're bringing that to the discussion. You're helping create that.
Yeah.
You know, you're not a blank slate. This
is not neutral journalism for
Right.
us. Yeah.
Okay. So this is what a page looks like. And come up with questions with the understanding that your questions could change, or you're going to ask different questions, or you're not going to ask any of the questions. But you know, you don't want to do an oral history by going like that. You do not want to do an oral history that way.
Then what, with no questions, is that what you're saying?
No, where you're.
Oh.
What was a
just
typical
asking
day for you,
questions.
like at a Borscht Belt?
Yeah.
Done? What role, if any, you know, on and on like that, you know? Because then you're getting a very abbreviated, truncated, specific answer.
Without engagement.
Yeah, right. Totally. I wanted to. Oh, go ahead.
So you know what I see? So the Borscht Belt's is set up where they can do an oral history. It sounds like in the library you have set up. But as a preservation or town historian,
that's the harder
or town store site, we don't have that. So we need to develop that.
Yeah, but we have buildings, we have structures.
Right.
Maybe that's the way to organize it.
But we don't have a place, we don't have the equipment.
Oh, no.
I'm talking about that. So the Borscht Belt's got equipment in a space. I'm taking the
We got the
library
library,
has
the historical
equipment,
society, we got lots of space.
but we don't. Outside of Cragsmore, outside the Borscht Belt, we gotta figure out how we can do oral histories that don't involve those two things.
Right.
Okay, and where we're gonna do it, and what equipment we're gonna use. I mean, I have a couple ideas.
Well, you could do it in the museum. You and I know that.
Yeah, and we were working toward that,
Yeah.
but that's gonna be a structured thing that we need to come up with.
Yeah.
Probably sooner than later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that really part of your mission statement, though, is the
Well, you look at the statute, our mission statement
is
is
that
quite
the
large, actually.
Historical Society of Wawarsing's mission statement?
No, it's not the Historical Society, it's the Friends of History, it's to help
Well,
preserve.
but
its-
they
No,
are-
no, no, I'm talking, she's
Oh,
talking
his
about me.
thing,
His thing,
My
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So, building on what we wanna do with that particular building, this is a good place to set something like that up.
Yeah.
Collaborations with
Yes.
local historical societies. or
yes.
whatever.
So that's probably one of the things we need to keep in.
Yeah.
When we look at that particular building.
Yeah.
Okay, that we can do something like this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and even doing it in a museum, it might trigger people's, you have
Yeah.
exhibits in there and you have all
Right.
kinds of stuff.
Right.
Mm-hmm. If you're able to bring in objects as well, if you're going to work remotely, that might be of interest, newspapers at the time and so on that can trigger stuff. That's very helpful.
I think that's one of the interesting pieces of context of an interview, that, we're discussing. The Borscht Belt Museum, there are interviews where people have visited the museum, right? So, that stimulates various memories. For the oral histories, we don't have to tug at people to please, that people come in, they enmesh themselves in the exhibits there, and the conversation comes out of them, it's like
That's for the Borscht Belt,
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah.
I can see that happening
It
there.
oozes- it
I can see
oozes
that
out.
happening.
Almost a
in Preston.
desperation, honestly, to get it out, to get their
But those are
story.
probably such fond memories because they were on vacations with their
Right.
family, and it's
Or,
not.
or worked there as a teenager and.
Yeah.
But I think,
Yes.
whether it's Bucky's, people, if they were, for example, in situ at the, the knife museum, the
Right.
history museum, that would evoke things too. But there are settings or whatever, whether it's the comfort of somebody's home and you're talking about family genealogy
Yeah.
and memories
Mhm.
and capturing that in an oral history, or whether you're talking about, the library in Craigsmoor for decades-long residents of Craigsmoor. These are contact points for people or jumping off points, context. It seems to me from what we've talked about, that context and some of the prep of the prep seems to me to take out of the need during the interview to grill somebody, like, where were you on the night of the 31st? You've done some of that homework before you sit down with the person you're interviewing, and that takes it out of the interview because the finding out of it anyway, it takes that out of the interview so that the meat of the interview, the organicness of the interview can go forth with less interference.
Yeah, no, you're supporting them in the place that they are already. It actually helps carry it, right? I was just wondering, the Craigsmoor thing, anytime I've gone up to Sam's Point and I see those buildings there, I'm like, what the hell is this?
We'll come by and we'll give you a tour.
I would love it, but I just, I wonder, feel free to just discard this, but I would, it'd be interesting, a few hundred folks, if there was one of those meeting halls up there that you were able to do a presentation of, having, meet and greet and refreshments and so on, and talk about the oral history project that you want to do, and maybe start getting names like that. And people, people love, getting together and chit-chatting, and, I love to, yeah. And maybe, better than Facebook,
Yeah.
right? From what you're telling me about where you are and the number of people, some sort of social that you'd be able to present that idea to, and then start getting the names and all of that. Okay. How are we on time? Okay.
20 minutes.
I want to talk a bit about, legal releases because even though this gives permission, you've gotten their permission. I had an incident recently that was very uncomfortable. So I interviewed Dave Getz, who was the drummer for Big Brother and the Holding Company, Janis Joplin's first band. And the reason I interviewed him for the Borscht Belt Museum was because prior, in the 50s, he was a drummer in jazz bands in Sullivan County and so on. And I sent along, I feel like I'm, the Woodstock oral history legal release. And I got an email back saying, I will not sign this. The dozens of interviews I've done in my time, I've never seen something so absurd and commanding, words like, I irrevocably, give up my first child. I mean, the language is really kind of ugly. I'm going to be fired. But I agree with it. It's not the first person who felt that way when they saw it. Most people just sign it, right? And it's not going to make a big difference anyway because it's going into the archives and so on. So what I did is I took out a legal release form. I found one that I like, and I'm going to tell you why I like it.
Yeah.
Oops. What is wrong with me?
So, Steve,
This is the one you sent me.
we also have a written history, we put stationery down on the table, from different hotels, and people come in,
That's
and
really
they write,
interesting.
so I've taken
Can I see
home,
a copy?
I take them home and read them, because we must have over 100 handwritten.
When they came to the museum, they wrote
And,
it.
my first trip to the bungalow colony was when I was 8. My father was a
Wow.
shoemaker in the city, and it
Make a
goes
great
on.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I look at these, I see these as gold, literally gold, but to translate them into some sort of, we were thinking of using them with a narrator and capturing some of the scenes that people were talking about, having somebody read the story.
Voiceover.
Voiceover as they were, and we've actually done a couple that came out pretty well. But it's like
like
manna
that.
from heaven. It's called, these are golden stories.
Yeah.
They also evoke when people visit the museum, that we have them strung up like on a clothesline.
With
and,
clothespins.
some of the samples of these, and people do
Yeah.
look at them as part of their visit to the museum.
Yeah, they'll stand there and read them.
So, it's grist for the mill, their experience of being at the museum.
Yeah.
And just, before we leave, it kind of gets at what do you want to do with these
Right.
things, the oral histories that you collect. And, what is your organization, or what do you want to do in your family genealogy but you have the oral history, that's great. And what's your questions like, what's your audience, for this, what are you gonna do with it, where's it gonna go after you take it?
Yep. The whole process of transcription, now using AI, there are good things, AI, right? Having them transcribed, then you have the transcriber listening and then filling in any areas that just didn't come out right. Often with the Borscht Belt oral histories, there was some stuff that was said in Yiddish, and Deneen Hitch would get in touch with me, and then I would call Joanne. Or several Jewish friends, but and ask for a translation. And then the idea, of course, of it becoming part of the archives. And then this is a good question. Preserving the voices is fantastic. I mean, that you are helping build the foundation of a community that's passing on, right?
Yes.
What have you considered, maybe quips, some small pieces of the oral histories being used? Is it the idea to have them in exhibits at all, or available to researchers, or
See, that's a
you don't have to have the answer to this yet?
Good question.
great question, because that's been my concern. We did oral history for quite a bit at the library by the Ulster County Clerk's Office. And they're just out there and God knows where they are and how to get a hold of them.
How about that old World
And what
War
do
II?
we-
They did that was World War II veterans.
Right, the veterans thing.
But
But where are
they
they?
are,
And,
those
yeah.
are-
So my dream,
Yeah.
to take our oral history, this
Yeah.
is my vision, that's why I wanna also video it, and once a week, post a story.
That's cool.
And, you know, you leverage social media,
Yeah.
whether it's using Facebook, but use
That's great.
YouTube, and tell the story. And this way, somebody said, instead of pulling people into the museum, you push the museum out to people. And that is a way to push the museum out to people.
That's a great idea.
And we
That's my
posted
vision.
some of ours on our website.
And that's why the
Somebody-
release,
Yeah.
Have
the
you-
release
They're
plays a
now?
very important role.
They're there
Yes.
now? I should go look. I didn't.
That's a great idea. I'm sorry I hadn't thought of it.
Why, it's patented.
No, that's really, really
You have to sign
helpful.
the release.
You know, the release forms that you're looking at, just very quickly, I know I started out with Dave Getz. This isn't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is very kind of caring about the very person that you've just interviewed. This isn't about, well, you've done your piece, kiss it goodbye, we're gonna do whatever we want with it, right? And not only that, it has the section in here of specify any limited restrictions or access. I've had, you know, one of my Haight-Ashbury oral histories had stories about Peggy Caserta. She owned a place on Haight Street, one of the first boutiques, and was lovers with Janis Joplin. And, you know, after he was done, a day or two later, he got in touch with me and he said, you know, I really rather you not say this, that, and the other thing. The one that we have for the Woodstock Museum, I love the Woodstock Museum. I just wish they had this section where people are looking at it and they're thinking, okay, you know, I can make a decision about if I want that to go in or not, you know. So yeah, you know.
Has this been legally vetted, and Jeff Slade being an attorney, I mean, does this hold up? And again, not that I'm worried about it in any way, shape, or form, but there is that one instance that it could happen and come back and hit you in the face. So does this have?
Well, not this one in particular.
Okay.
I just took,
love it.
downloaded this because I thought it was kind.
I love it. No, I love it. I just
Right.
wondered if it's.
Well, you're
Legally, I had the
torn
same
between
question.
Coming up with language, you know, like we all see, and what we lawyers call contracts of adhesion.
Yeah.
Right.
Which mean you really don't have any damn choice about signing them, so you just sign them anyway.
Right.
And something that
Right.
really speaks persuasively to what you're trying to do and what the limitations are on it, which is, this is much closer to, but you know, words like irrevocably and assignees and designees and so on.
People get nervous.
Yeah. What the
Yeah.
hell is that?
We
I
could
know
go
what
without
it
the
is,
museum
but-
board. I'll give it to them.
I mean, some of the legalese, I guess, has to be there, you know, like as a medical person, I understand where but still, this is so much kinder. If you, look at the bottom, there's the disclaimer, right?
You know,
That's,
I used to tell people that they could sign just about anything because we could find our way out of it. So that's what I did for a living. So, you know, I think you want to get an understanding of what you're trying to do and you don't want to mislead people.
yeah,
And by virtue of the fact that somebody is sitting down with you and telling their story, I think 9 times out of 10 they want it to be heard. They
Yeah.
want that story to be told.
And you don't want to give them the impression you're going to do something nefarious with it or.
right,
You know, we
right.
have done one interview though, where the children didn't like the interview and
Okay.
came back and said,
Hmm,
do you have to post that? Like,
interesting.
it's embarrassing.
Which one was it?
It's-
Was it,
Oh, gosh.
was the narrator still alive?
Yes,
Did they weigh in?
you know, I just talked them down. So.
And then
you
there's
know.
that.
But honestly, we didn't even do releases or anything. We
Okay.
just said, would you like to do this? We're gonna post it on our website. Are you good with that? And they were all said, sure. And then the children came back and didn't really like what the parent said and said, you know, this is kind of cringy for us. And, you know, But I was able to like kind of rationalize with them.
So they relaxed about it, you didn't have to?
They did relax about it, but
So your interviews, do you give the narrator an opportunity to hear it again or see it again?
I was gonna ask that question.
Yes.
Do they get to review the
Yes.
transcript and
But-
correct it?
You know, 90-something% of the time, they don't ask to do that.
Right.
What they do is say, you know, can I get a copy of this sometime for my own, you know, for my family to watch?
My
or something.
kids.
Yeah, why not? It's a beautiful
So,
thing.
and, you know, we put their name on the list, and then the transcriber ends up having to, you know, download and so on, but yeah.
There seem to be any number of outlets for that, like with the Borscht Belt Museum, you know, there's a sampling of some of those oral histories that, you know, have been taken, you may be aware, that play on loop in the museum. They're, you know, I'm sure they're not the whole interview, but they're snippets that were taken, and AI was used to kind of, they're audio, but the AI is used to overlay that with some images. And they play on a loop inside the museum. That's one way as part of the museum experience for visitors, and the people who have, you know, given them are certainly fine with it. You know, so that's one outlet that the Elliott's mentioned. Another one with pushing the museum out to people as opposed to, you know, bringing them
I
in to
love
see
that one.
an exhibit. There's, you know, researchers who, you know, may want to, you know, look if it's organized by topic, right? Or incorporated as part of exhibits. So if there's an exhibit on, I don't know, I'll make something up, on golf courses of the Borscht Belt hotels or something like that. And somebody's talking in their memories in an interview about, you know, I played the Ellenville golf course and I talked to the pro, and gosh, you know, that just brings all kinds of memories forward for me. That little snippet might be incorporated into that exhibit to supplement exhibits. There's all sorts of outlets, I guess is my point,
Yeah.
for these kind of histories.
Yeah. I have to see where you guys are located. Is there a building?
we have
Yeah.
the Historical Society, the library, and the Stone Church, so.
So the library is, as you're going up, is off to the left?
They
and
both
then
are,
there's-
they're next
They're
door
next
to
door
each
to each
other.
Okay, oh,
The first one you come to is the Historical Society, which used to be the Federated Church,
Mhm.
until it went out of business in the '60s, but then there's the library, which is about to experience its 100th year anniversary of being built.
Yeah, this is the
Oh.
100th year.
Yeah.
oh, that's great. That might be the
And then there's the
event to
church,
get
which
all
I run,
the
which
folks
is
in.
even older than the, well, it's not older than the Federated Church. but it's-
So you mentioned transcriber. Tell me the role of the transcriber.
All right, so I'm talking out of turn, because once I finish it, I hand it over, right?
Okay.
So at the Woodstock Museum, there's a couple of people who transcribe, and it's first, I don't know how this happens, but AI gives a transcription first. Then the transcriber is listening through it to look for mistakes. They do not have to do this whole thing like the old days.
Yeah.
And then we'll, you know, circle stuff and get back in touch with the narrator, the interviewer, and ask, you know, can you describe what that meant, or, you know, yeah, I mean, I think of so many, particularly with the Borscht Belt, there were so many words
Yeah.
that were, you know, that were coming up. And then, you know, they're digitized, and they're become part of an archive. I'm sort of out of the loop by that point. I just know the process that gets them there. Let me just look at the agenda for a second. I'm getting brain fog. Hold on one second. Is everybody okay?
Yeah.
All right.
So there's a printable translation of the oral history?
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you transcribed any of yours? No, probably not.
Maureen has done it, though, when she did the restoration of the L. Henry's house with, I mean, it was Benoit and Nicholas's experiences,
She did an interview with Benoit Nicholas?
and recorded it and
Okay.
transcribed it, yeah.
I actually have just
Yeah,
been doing
I
AI
think-
transcriptions.
So,
So Ed, I made it clear that this, I wasn't saying to use this, right? I'm saying this is a kinder one that I found versus the sort of, hand over your property to us. It's ours now.
You want a release for us to use the release?
You're the legal man. And
I
you're
don't
the,
wanna be
you're the
sued.
legal woman, you know.
Yeah.
That's just a little legal joke.
but I've seen the other one abused. So we have a gift agreement at the library. That's absolutely horrible. It basically tells you, your property is now our property.
Yeah.
We can do anything we want with it,
Or nothing with
including sanctioning it and getting rid of it.
Mhm.
And I can't tell how many people say, wait, this has been in my family for so many years, you can get rid of it if you want to, you know, and it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrible. So you gotta find something in between that doesn't say, we're gonna destroy you.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
totally disrespectful of the
Yes.
relationship that you have built with the narrator.
Yeah.
Totally disrespectful.
Yeah.
It's, it's peace, love, and legalese. I mean, it's just wrong, it's egregious. It feels wrong. It feels like a bait and switch in terms of, how you've reached out to somebody, the kind of relationship you've made, the way you care about them, and then to hand that over. I just, Any questions? Anybody else exhausted?
No, it's good.
Well, has
Oh,
any
great.
narrator that turned around and tried to sue, like,
No,
the historical
no.
society or anything
One
like that?
thing that we should certainly do is, give Steve our emails
Yes.
so that we can
Yes, please.
follow up.
Yeah.
And I did, Steve, the four-part
Thank you.
harmony piece that you mentioned, the keys to words to the effect, the keys to a good oral history interview. That would be one thing we'd wanna send everybody so that they can
Yep.
take that piece up and make sure people have that.
Yeah, yep, I'll send a few things around. I was gonna play them, but then it seemed,
It probably,
Schmaltzy.
I'm guessing that it probably will capture some of the stuff that we've talked about today, but it's called something like best practices, right, to do an interview.
did I send you best
You sent me
practices?
the, four-part best practices.
Yes, yes.
That I
Yes.
printed out this
Yeah.
morning.
Okay, all right, thank you for doing that, that just went
Yeah.
past me completely, the most important part of oral history.
Yeah.
All right, if you give me your emails, that'd be great, and we can stay in touch.
Next thing, I have to go, I have a meeting in Kingston, so I'm on.
Yes.
Do you
So-
want,
It's a link
Go
on
ahead.
We set-
the email that you sent me.
Yes.
Where did I do
I'll
that?
forward you a